this episode of Lives on the Line, the podcast, the Central Valley, California. In the late 80s, a string of murders occurred along a major highway. A serial killer emerged, the I-5 Strangler. I sit down with David Vito Bertocchini. We'll discuss this case, along with his career. 3, 2, and rolling. Vito.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Good. Thanks for coming on the show for a little bit.
No problem.
Appreciate your time.
No problem.
So you're a retired sheriff's deputy?
Yes, I worked at the sheriff's office and then the district attorney's office.
Okay. What sheriff's office did you work for?
San Joaquin County Sheriff and San Joaquin County District Attorney.
Okay. So Northern California, Central Valley.
Yes.
Okay. When did you start over at the SO?
That was at the end of 1980.
Okay. And what kind of assignments did you hold while there?
At that time at the sheriff's office, all the deputies that were hired had to work custody. So I started off in custody and then went to patrol. After patrol, I worked burglary detectives, then worked homicide, left homicide and worked canine, and then worked vice for just a short time, and then I transferred to the DA's office.
Okay.
And from there, usually the people going to the DA's office got the assignment of working welfare fraud at first, and then after that, I worked gangs after that.
Okay. So gangs.
Yeah.
Any particular gangs that you worked?
I worked motorcycle gangs.
All right. How was that?
That was a good job.
Yeah.
It was a good job. Some of the best investigators I've ever worked with worked motorcycle gangs. To this day, I still stay in contact with a lot of those guys, and I know guys throughout the United States. I trust those guys with my life. Those guys were fantastic people to work with.
Yeah. It seems like it'd be a pretty dangerous assignment working the gangs, the motorcycle gangs.
Not much on our part. There was some of the guys that actually infiltrated the gangs. Those guys, they're the ones that had the really difficult assignments. I mean, they had to live it, 24/7. For us, I wasn't infiltrating any gang. We're just more gathering of intel on the gangs and for prosecutions and everything.
Okay, so like the investigations for the crimes they committed and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay. Were there a lot at the time in the Central Valley?
There's always been a lot of crimes
Still a lot.
ignored by, unfortunately, ignored by law enforcement. They're very active in this area, and unfortunately, not a lot of activity from law enforcement pursuing them for whatever reason.
What do you think? Is it because there's other things that are making their priorities, I guess, or that the community want addressed?
I think when you look at the gangs, typically people think of the street gangs. They're dropping people on the sidewalk. They're doing the drive-bys. The motorcycle gangs aren't as active as that. I'm not saying they don't do that. Yes, there has been, but they're not far outnumbered by the street gangs as far as that type of activity. But the motorcycle gangs are typically doing a lot of drugs, prostitution, other things that they can make money for. So a lot of it's behind the scenes, where the street gangs, you see the violence coming to light. But still, many of the motorcycle gangs are very violent still. It's just not on the level of the violence that you would see from the street gangs. Right.
Are there any cases that stand out for you from when you worked the investigations for those?
There's been a few. Like the last surveillance I worked before I retired. I just happened to be taking pictures, and ended up taking a picture of a new hangaround, and never seen him before. Took pictures of him.
And a hangaround is someone who just got into or is trying to get into the gang.
Trying to get in. This is their first step before becoming a prospect.
Okay.
And took pictures of him, and 6 days later, he was involved in a murder. And we didn't know who it was at the time. And then going back, I was able to pull the pictures up, and I was able to identify him, and it helped lead to his arrest. So that was pretty good. For my last one, I was always happy with that one. And then there were some other ones where we worked on where one of the guys was probably the truest biker in that sense. He really believed in the biker ways, and probably one of the most dangerous bikers I've ever encountered, but he was the nicest guy to talk to. He looked like an old man. He did a drive-by shooting at another rival biker's place, and he had already been convicted of a couple of homicides. And there was more that he had going with him. And he was extremely, extremely dangerous man. And I had to testify in that as far as the gang enhancements and everything like that. That was an interesting case, very interesting case to work on.
Yeah. And he was convicted of those crimes?
He was convicted, and he was sentenced to a bunch of years. And I think 2 years ago, he died in prison.
Okay. And then because of your investigations in motorcycle gangs, you started teaching that as well with law enforcement, or you at least an expert when it comes to that field?
I've taught a bunch of different classes for different agencies and for motorcycle gangs, and then testified in court.
Right.
In regards to the motorcycle gangs, yeah.
Okay. One of the other cases that I want to talk to you about too is the Kibbe. Is that his last name?
Roger Kibbe.
Right. And this is
the I-5 Strangler.
Yes. This is a big case. What year was this?
Well, when we came across him was in first time I handled any of his case was July of 1986. It was my second homicide. A young female had been found off of Korea Road and Highway 12 west of Lodi.
Okay.
And she was found floating face down in the water, dressed only in her bra and a pair of shorts. So it took us a while to, thank God I had a great partner, my partner Pete Rosenquist, thank God for him, the best homicide detective ever to work the case with. But he had all the experience, and we worked it together, and we were able to identify her. And then almost a month to a day after Stephanie Brown's, our victim, was found, a young lady disappeared off the freeway by Peltier and 5. And it looked like it possibly could be related. And then just shortly after she disappeared, another body was found off Highway 12, but in Sacramento County.
Okay.
So that started, we linked all three of those together, and what really linked them together was all their clothes had been cut, which was really, really odd, the clothes cutting.
Cut as far as like just cut off, or?
It was just non-functional cutting. On our first victim, she had a tank top blouse type, and it was cut up the sides, and her strap was cut. On the girl that was abducted from the freeway, she had nylons and a dress on, and her nylons were cut, and her top was cut and was used as a ligature around her neck. And then the third girl that was found in Sacramento County, she had a spaghetti strap type on, and it was cut away and was used as a bindings around her wrist and her neck. So those are the first three, and they all had clothes cutting. They had been transported from one location to another. They were strangulation cases. So then we realized we probably had a serial killer, and that started it all off at that time.
Where did the name I-5 Strangler come from? Was that something that was dubbed in the media or from investigators?
That was the media. The media gave it the I-5 Strangler.
Because it was all off of Interstate 5.
The first two cases, our first victim, her car was found at Hood Franklin and I-5 in Sacramento County. And then her body was found by Highway 12 in Korea. And then the second girl the second victim that came up in the case, her car was found abandoned by Peltier Road and I-5. And I'm sorry, it wasn't found abandoned. She left with her mother, and they broke down at Peltier and 5. And then this guy had come over and offered a ride, and that was the last time she was seen. So they gave him the I-5 Strangler.
Okay. And on that one, was it the mom or the daughter that was taken?
It was the daughter.
The daughter. So the mom
taken.
actually she saw the person, but she didn't really get a good description at that point.
You know, the mom and daughter had gone to celebrate from Sacramento. They came down to a Arroyo's restaurant. Arroyo's used to have a restaurant in downtown Stockton.
Okay.
And they were going to go to the nightclub, and they were going to dance and have a dinner, because their daughter just had a baby 6 months prior, and it was a way to her to get the daughter out of the house. So after the dancing and dinner, they were traveling on the way home, and their car started to experience some difficulty. They broke down by Peltier and 5. And they thought at that time, let's just wait for CHP to drive by. But, at that time, CHP, with limited manpower, was working more towards Sacramento and Stockton on DUIs, and no one had gone by. So it was about 4 a.m. when a guy comes by in a dark-colored sports car and asks them if they need help. Mom says, yeah, we broke down. Can you help us, with anything? And he says, well, up ahead, and this is 1986, before cell phones,
Right.
if you can imagine that time. He said, up ahead, there's a couple miles, there's a phone booth. So he drove him up to the phone booth, actually drove just Mom. And Mom tried calling back in Sacramento to people. She couldn't get a hold of anyone. He brought Mom back to where their car had broken down, and he said, I'm going to Sacramento. I can give you guys a ride, but because I only have a 2-seater car, I can only give a ride one at a time. So the mom knew that her daughter had to take care of her baby, so she said, can you please give my daughter a ride? And that was the last the daughter was seen.
And then the other one where she was left over off of, this is the first one I think that happened. She was on her way, I think, to Sacramento. Is that correct? But she went the wrong direction.
She was at home, and she had a roommate, female roommate.
Right.
She was at home, and she got a call about midnight. Her roommate and the roommate's boyfriend had gone to downtown Sacramento. They stopped at a liquor store, and they were going to go back to the roommate's boyfriend's apartment, and the car wouldn't start. So the roommate called our victim, Stephanie Brown, called her up and said, can you come and give us a ride? So Stephanie, being the good friend that she was, got out of bed, drove to where they were at, picked them up, and then drove them to the area of southwest Sacramento. And she wasn't really familiar with that area. So he dropped them off. The boyfriend said, okay, you're going to get back on the freeway. You're going to go northbound. But for some reason, she went southbound. Now, later on, when we looked, there was a large sign right there for Sacramento, but it was covered up with the oleanders. So maybe that confused her a little bit. So she went southbound. And at that time, there was really nothing between that area of Sacramento and all the way until you got to basically Stockton. There was nothing out there. So she made it all the way down to Hood Franklin Road, and that's where her car was found abandoned. Now, her car was functioning with no problem. My partner and I drove that car trying to make it stall afterwards, and we couldn't get that thing to stall. For some reason, that car stopped. And the killer eventually tells us a story of how it stopped, which I don't particularly believe. But he gave a story of why the car stopped. I don't know if you want me to go into that or...
Yeah, we'll go into that in a bit. But also in the car, too, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a map in there that was found in the car?
There was
in Stephanie's car?
The map was found actually outside the car. When Sacramento Sheriff, that was in there, Sacramento Sheriff did a missing persons investigation on her before we had identified Stephanie. And when we went back to the scene, we found a map out in the area that had been opened up to that particular area. Unfortunately, it had been sitting in the hot sun, and we didn't get any fingerprints or anything off of it. But it was opened up that area. So could it have been from one of them? Yeah, possibly. So
she may have been lost and pulled the map out to find out where she was going. And
Maybe.
As far as the scene goes, was there anything unusual aside from the clothing that was cut that stood out for you?
Yeah. Later on that evening when we made notification to her parents, and this is now, going from 8 a.m, and now I think we made notification to her parents probably just before 11 o'clock. We were trying to beat the 11 o'clock news. The news had known that Sacramento County was investigating a missing female. We have a victim female of a homicide. So they were going to put it on the news. So we were rushing in between trying to do everything else to make notification. So when we did finally make notification, we talked to the mom. And as hard as that was for the parents, we had to ask some questions at the time. And the mom had made a comment, describing her daughter with her long, beautiful hair and everything. Now I remember looking at our victim. She didn't have long hair. And so I remember asking the mom, what length was it? And the mom said it was below her bra line, would have been down in the middle of her back. Well, our victim didn't have that hair. So we went back and long story short, her hair was cut. So besides her clothes being cut, her hair was cut as well.
And the scissors that were used were still there at the scene as well?
The scissors, I went back into the ditch where she was found, and it was probably about 3 feet deep. And I went back with a magnet and went back and forth the location, and I happened to find a pair of scissors right there. And the scissors were in excellent shape, so they hadn't been there for a while. We knew they were very recent. And then when the person who prepared our victim for the funeral, she said that you're looking at a pair of scissors that cut her hair because the hair was not frayed as in a sawing motion as with a knife. And she says, you're probably looking at a pair of scissors that have about 4 to 6 inches in length of a blade. And that's what these were. And these just fit just perfectly.
Now, at the time, was this, I know there was a lot going on in that area, or just in California in general, with different abductions and serial killers and such. At the time, were you kind of thinking that it may be related to these other ones that were going on, or was there other ones going on at that particular time? I know there was like the Night Stalker and cases like that, but that was before then, I believe.
The Night Stalker was down south, so weren't too concerned with that. I know that we started looking at our guy, maybe if he was responsible for the Green River killings up in Washington.
Right.
We had those, and then the really surprising thing about all this was, at that time, how many unaccounted females were out there, missing persons, or females that were victims of a homicide that had not been solved. So you really start spreading out, thinking how many of these could possibly be related, and that was really a surprising part.
So a lot of Jane Does that were
a lot
still
of Jane
unidentified.
Does. Yes, still to this day, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah, I spoke to somebody who'd mentioned that exact thing, where they went down and they're looking for their missing person, and they went down to another county in the middle of nowhere, and the sheriff told them that this is just an area where a lot of people were just left out here, and because of animals and the terrain and everything else, they're never identified. So I never knew that.
It's really unfortunate, and DOJ tries to keep a good database as far as some of the victims, but I know that even they've missed. The system's not perfect.
Yeah. Now, at this time, how big was DNA?
DNA was not even available then. So when we had our victim, Stephanie, when we had her, we did a sexual assault examination during the autopsy, and they were able to come up with some seminal fluid, and all it could give us at that time was a blood type. DNA wasn't going to be available. This is 86. DNA wasn't around. Just coming into it maybe in its infancy. A couple of years later, and then I think finally in 92 we used a little bit of the DNA for this case, but it wasn't prevalent like it is nowadays.
Yeah.
Thank God that we have it now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. At the time, so you had 3 victims.
At that time, we had 3, and eventually it evolved to. Well, he was convicted of 7.
Okay.
And there's a couple more that we know of.
Oh, okay.
And realistically, I think all of us were convinced. Realistically, we're looking at a minimum of probably 20. Minimum of 20 that he's probably done. And it's probably much higher.
After the 3, how were the others tied to the same person? Was it because of the clothing and just the kind of MO that?
It was mainly the clothing. The clothing being cut was such an odd thing. And what had happened is that we had the witness, we had the mom. So when I was working on the mom's case, I took mom to an artist. San Jose Police Department had a composite artist that would sit down with our witness and draw the suspect. So we got a good drawing. And in the meantime, I went with mom on our way to San Jose, and I tried to show her every small sports car she possibly could look at. And unfortunately, Mom, she didn't drive, and she wasn't a car person. So it was difficult for her nighttime. It was difficult for her to identify any type of car. But she did the composite. So we took that composite, and we put it to the print media, to the TV media. One of our victims that had been found in Sacramento County was a prostitute out of Modesto. So I took the flyers and I met with every prostitute in Modesto I could have, in Stockton, in Sacramento County, and given them to the prostitutes. If you see this, give us a call. I had all our information on there. So it was in December of '86, two prostitutes working along Wilson Way in Stockton. It used to be the stroll zone right there. And they get confronted by a guy in a dark-colored sports car, and the guy wants to give them $1,000 for some sexual acts and everything. Now, these girls are not going to make $1,000 working on the streets, and they know it. And as you know, these girls are pretty wise. They've been through the mill. They're pretty streetwise. So they back away, and they just happen to see after this guy drives away, they happen to see a sheriff's car drive by. So they flag down the two deputies, and they tell these deputies, hey, we got this flyer. This guy came by, tried to offer us a date. He looked like the composite, had a car. As a matter of fact, there he goes now. Guy's driving by right now. So the two deputies make a U-turn, go over there, and he makes a right turn on the red without stopping. They do the traffic stop, and they get his information, cite him, and they send me the info. So the guy lived in Oakley, which is right next to Antioch. So
that's in Contra Costa County.
Yeah, and at this time we had, because we'd put that picture in the media, we'd had hundreds and hundreds of calls from people where the person looked familiar, and we were running down all the leads in our county, and Sacramento was trying to run down the leads in their county. We were working this together.
How difficult was that when you're working one lead and all of a sudden you keep getting these other leads?
Extremely difficult, because at that time, my partner, unfortunately, he got tied up in other homicides. And so it was just me working on this, and there's no way I could do it. Finally, they brought in another officer to track down just some of those leads. I could never have done it. And unfortunately, there's other homicides that are coming in, and I'm getting assigned other homicides at the same time.
So you're not just working this one case, you're working everything else that comes in too.
No, but we're putting in a lot on this case, because we know this one we really, you'll want to solve everything, but
sure.
This one we know was going to continue on. So try to make contact with this person in Oakley, and no one's home, so I leave a business card on the door. And a day later, I get a call from an investigator from Douglas County Sheriff's Office in Nevada. And he said, you left a card on my brother's door. And he says, what's this about? And so I said, hey, he's just one of many that people said that his name is familiar. I didn't want to say that he was stopped with a prostitute or trying to pick up a prostitute. And he says, he no longer lives in Oakley. He's moving to a public storage facility in Sacramento. You can make arrangements there and for the interview. So I said, okay. So I go to Sacramento. I meet with Sacramento detectives in the evening, and make contact with him. And he was with his wife, and ask him if he'd come down to the sheriff's office in Sacramento County and do an interview. So he agrees. So we go down there, and there was details in that interview that just, and I always describe it as this. You've always heard that expression, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. That's what I had from talking to this guy. He owned a 1980 280Z, dark blue, so he matched that. The prostitute in Sacramento, she was last seen getting into a white 1974 Maverick. He said he used to own one. He used to work in Salida, right next to in Modesto. He knew where the prostitutes worked in Modesto, but claimed he'd never been with one. So there was a lot of little things that just really stood out.
How was his demeanor when he talked to you?
Very confident. He was very confident in his talking. referred to our missing women. You know, what do you think about these women?
Mm-hmm.
Missing women this is words, excuse me, but we're dumb bitches.
Yeah.
So he's very confident, very like you got nothing on me, and I didn't have anything. And I just like I said, he just really made the awareness go up. Was he something? I don't know. You know, I don't know. So after our interview, his wife had driven down there. She says, "I want to go down for this interview too." I said, "That's fine. You can follow us in your car." And she went down there. And she wasn't there for the interview, but she was there afterwards. And I said, "Hey, we want to go ahead and take pictures of you, Roger. I want to take pictures of you and get your fingerprints." And he agreed. And while he was having that done, the wife came up to me and very bitter. She was really just bitter. And she said, "You know, this is just like what happened to him back in Contra Costa County 10 years ago." And I said, "What happened 10 years ago?" "Oh, they accused him of being involved in this girl, of a missing girl." Well, now you really start thinking, what is involved there? Now, once you get arrested, you have your, they would call it a rap sheet, give your criminal history and everything.
Right.
Well, he was only a suspect in that. So nothing ever hit when we ran his name. So next morning, and I'm on the phone with Walnut Creek, Contra Costa County, and they had this young lady named Llewellyn Burley. Llewellyn had disappeared on 9/11 of 77, so almost 10 years earlier. She had disappeared and never found. And so when his name came up in the investigation, and the reason it came up is that almost a month to the day after she disappeared, Roger Kibbe had tried to make a date with a prostitute at a Black Angus in Concord. And he had gone to the Berkeley Barb. Berkeley Barb was like an underground newspaper. I don't know if it still exists or not. But you could buy, there was advertised prostitution, drugs, all sorts of stuff in this newspaper. So she had advertised in there, and she makes an agreement to meet this guy at the Black Angus. So they get there, and he has this van, this multicolored van. And in the 1970s, guys had these, vans, like if you ever watched that cartoon Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, Mystery Machine.
Yes, that's what it was. And they had these really modified vans. So she makes a date with this guy, and they get inside the van, and they take off. And she later tells us they drive to a really remote area, and they have sex. And he decides, "I'm not going to pay." And he decides, "We're going to keep on driving." And he goes out there, and he has sex again. Basically, he's raping her at this point. He grabs her, and he takes a knife, and he says, "We're getting out of the car." And they start walking into a field. And he puts the knife right up under her throat, and he's walking her out into the field. Now, she goes, "I'm going to die. I'm going to die." So she's talking to him, and then finally she asks him, "Why are you doing this?" And he responds, he goes, "Because I'm an asshole." And she tells him, "You're not a bad guy. You're not a bad guy." And as she's saying, keeps talking to him, "You're not a bad guy," the knife starts coming down. So she continues to talk to him like that, and he finally decides, "Okay, I'll bring you back." So he brings her back to the van, brings her back to the Black Angus, drops her off, and he leaves. Well, before she got into the van, because she's a wary prostitute, she wanted to see his driver's license. And she looked at the name and everything, and she saw the name. And then when she got out of the van, she wrote down the license plate. Now, there had been some information that had come in regards to this missing person, Llewellyn Burley, that she was last seen getting into a multicolored van. Well, she contacts local authorities there and tells them, "Hey, this is your guy. He threatened me and this and that." So his name comes up in the investigation at that time. They did a surveillance of his residence, and he picked him out right away. He picked out the surveillance team right away. Actually went over there and confronted them. And this is when he was actually living in Pittsburgh. He went and filed a complaint against the officers. They're harassing him. And so I listened to the interview. They actually still had the tape interview, and he's very confrontational. And then until one of the investigators gets a little bit more aggressive with him, and then he backs away. But He complains that his rights were violated because they searched his van and didn't have permission to search his van. So he plays that game a little bit. Now, what had happened on this one is that Llewellyn Burley worked for Heald's Business College. And while she was attending Heald's Business College, and while there, they got a phone call from a guy who identified himself as John Brown. John Brown was working for Helena Rubinstein Makeup Company, and they were going to go from San Francisco, and they were going to open up a new shop in Concord, right where their new strip mall was at. And he needed a young lady to assist him. So they put Llewellyn Burley in contact with this guy. You want to go over there, and you want to meet with him. So she meets with him on September 10th, a Saturday. And she meets, and she dressed very well and everything, and meets in his van at the strip mall. And she completes that interview, and she goes home, and she has a live-in boyfriend, and she tells her boyfriend, something's just not right. You know, I wish she would have trusted her instinct, but she goes, something's just not right. So he told her to come back the next day, and you have to fill out some paperwork. But the job's yours. You just have to fill out the application, everything. And he enticed her with, this job, you're going to have a credit card. We're going to pay you I think it was $3,000 a month, which is what a lot of money at that time.
Yeah.
So he enticed her with a lot of stuff. So as she agreed to meet him next morning, her boyfriend said, you want me to go with you? He said, no, you can stay here. So he says, here, take my knife. And she goes back there to meet with him, and people remember her in the van. You know, that's where the multicolored van came around, meeting with somebody, and then she's never seen again. So that's how in 1977 he first came up, had the attempt 1 month after that, and then we don't come across him again until 1986. So what happens between those times? There's a lot of Jane Does, a lot of even identified victims in that time. Is he responsible for them? You know, but there's a lot during that time.
And they eventually found Burley, is that her last name?
No, she was never.
Oh, she was never found?
She was never found. What had happened is that after we got him to confess to all the crimes, he brought us back to the area of Lake Berryessa.
Right. Before we get to that, so you identified him through the vehicle description from that case earlier, and then his brother contacted you, said, and you spoke with him. What happened after that?
So at that time, we just didn't have enough. Didn't have enough evidence whatsoever. So unfortunately, Napa County ends up getting another victim. Contra Costa County gets another victim. And then Lake Tahoe, up by Lake Tahoe, El Dorado County gets another victim. And the victim up in El Dorado County, again, her clothes are cut. And this time at the scene, there is some parachute cord left at the scene. And later we discover our killer used to be a big parachutist. He had like 4,200 jumps.
Okay.
So there's parachute cord at the scene, and then again, there was some ligature around her neck, but parachute cord were just small pieces were left at the scene.
And that's unusual because you won't see that very often.
No. So a couple of months after that, there was a prostitute working in Sacramento, and she's working right around there. And about 2 a.m, guy comes up in a car, white Hyundai 4-door car, and wants to make a date with her and take pictures with her. And again, the offer is $1,000. So she agrees. The guy drives to a golf course that's closed, but the parking lot is open. And as they get to the golf course, they shut off the lights to the back end of the golf course. She starts to adjust her seat so she can perform a sex act. And as she's doing that, she hears the ratcheting noise of a handcuff. And she's been arrested a bunch of times. She knows what that noise is.
Yeah.
So she hears that, and all of a sudden the guy grabs her by the back of the head and starts slamming her head into the dash of the car. So she's fighting. She's fighting now, and she's thinking, "Oh my God, he's going to kill me." She looks up in the distance. She sees a pair of headlights coming towards her. Headlights are coming, and she's got the door open, and she's screaming, yelling. The killer sees the headlights coming, pushes her out of the car, and he starts taking off. Well, she starts waving at the car, and lucky for her, it was a Sacramento police officer who was coming in to make his rounds because there had been some vandalism at the golf course. He was coming in making his checks at night. She yells at him. That guy was trying to abduct me. He makes a U-turn, goes behind the car. He sees something come flying out of the car. Something's getting tossed out of the car. He makes a traffic stop. They end up arresting him, and it was Roger Kibbe, our guy that we had talked to earlier. And what he had thrown out of the car was a big plastic Ziploc bag. And inside that was a garrote fashioned with 2 wooden dowels and a parachute cord. And the only purpose is for strangulation.
And something where you twist on the ends and it gets tighter.
You would wrap it around the neck and pull, or
Okay.
you could twist.
I see. Okay.
And then a pair of scissors, a sexual vibrator, some hair bands to put like a hair in a ponytail, the handcuff keys, those were all together. Now, when that happened, I mean, we knew, okay, this is our guy. This is our guy. Now we want to do a search warrant. So he gets arrested for the attempted abduction. And in the meantime, we start a 24/7 surveillance on Roger Kibbe. And there was 3 of us from San Joaquin Sheriff and 3 from Sacramento Sheriff. And we surveilled his public storage in Sacramento County. And we teamed up, so if he came to San Joaquin County, that we would, have one San Joaquin deputy, one Sacramento deputy, and then if in Sacramento County, the same thing. So we knew where we were going. And we stayed with them until we had written up the search warrant. We had a Sacramento detective assigned to write the search warrant. And this, search warrant was thick. And poor guy that got assigned with that, great guy that did that search warrant, because he had to link every bit of items, every case together, and all the items that were missing from that.
Wow.
So he wrote the search warrant. So eventually when we do serve the search warrant, at his residence, he had a piece of parachute cord that he would use to tease the cat, maybe go back and forth. Now the parachute cord at his residence, the parachute cord that was found in his little killing kit on the traffic stop, and the parachute cord that was found at the crime scene in El Dorado County, all had minute specks of red paint on it, like somebody had spray painted outside and the little particles had fallen. So that was a very, very significant piece of evidence. So that got us forward, where at that time, the way the law was in California, you could only charge the crime of murder where it occurred or where it initially started from. So we could only go for a count of murder in El Dorado County. So he was charged in El Dorado County. Unfortunately, I had to go up there and testify for a day. The families of our other victims had to go up there and testify. So he gets convicted of 1 count of murder, but we have all these other cases. And so if you want to try each case, each county has to have its own little trial.
That's very time consuming. And not only that, but I'm sure it's traumatic for the families. They have to
Absolutely
go through all this all over again.
You're victimizing the victims. It just didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense. So,
but that's since no longer the case, though, correct?
No. So after that occurred, we ended up contacting. I got a wild hair. So we need to have a law. We need to have a law that if you kill, why can't we just have 1 trial? Why do we? The only person that benefits from the multiple trials is the defendant, and we, like I said before, we victimize our victims. We make them go back and forth, and it's not fair to our victims' families. So why can't we just have 1? We're charging him with a state crime. We're not charging him with a county crime. Why should he be entitled to a new trial as soon as he steps over a county line? So I get a hold of one of our state senators. I write this what I thought was a nice little letter. And I don't know what it takes to get a law. I have no idea. So I write this letter, and I get a response back. And he says, hey, you know what? Like it, good idea. So I'm thinking, hey, next week we should have this law.
Yeah, here we go.
So I don't hear nothing for a while. So then I get a hold of one of our local assemblymen. And I figure this time we'll really pursue it. We're going to take him to lunch. So I got one of our association guys. We brought him to lunch, and he said, "Okay, like it, good idea." Don't hear anything back again. So it's a little bit frustrating. So take him to lunch again, and he said, "Well, some people didn't like it." I said, "Who didn't like it?" "Well, some defense attorney groups didn't like it." And I said, "Well, of course they're not going to like it,
Yeah.
But I said, you have to really think of it for the victims and the victims' families." So then I'm thinking, what are you going to do? So somebody tells me, what you should do is get a hold of one of those crime victim groups. So I ended up getting a hold of this group, Crime Victims United. And it just happened to be at a time where they had a big conference in Sacramento. And go to this conference, and a lot of bigwigs and politicians are at this thing. And so they bring me in, and I don't know who I'm meeting, but later on they usher me off into the room where I meet with this one person. And he says, "Now, what is it that, type of law that you're talking about?" So I explained it to him. He says, "I think that we can do something with that." God, 6 months later, I think, I get a phone call and say, "We got a serial killer law. So now we can charge the person in one county, one time, and don't have to victimize our families." So DNA now has gotten much better. So I go back to the prison where Kibbe now is serving his time. He got 25 to life on the El Dorado case.
And that was the only case that he got time for.
That's the only case.
At that point.
Yes, only case he convicted for. Matter of fact, when we interviewed his cellmate said that he kept a brand new pair of jeans in his cell, and those were the ones he was going to wear when he got out of prison.
No.
So go over there and I get a blood sample for him, and I tell him, DNA now. I said, we're going to compare, and he says, "Yeah." And I said, "Would you ever mind talking to me about this case?" He goes, "I don't know, maybe." I said, "I'll tell you what." I said, "I'm going to get some blood." And I said, "I'm coming back." I said, "I'm going to get you." Okay. So send in the DNA. Of course, it takes a while for the process to go through, and it comes back when we get a positive on our first victim, Stephanie Brown. And then we get a positive on the case of a young lady, a prostitute who was killed in Concord. She was killed on a golf course, left on a golf course. So I got 2 DNA cases on them. So I go back to the prison, and I tell them, "Okay, remember me?" "Yeah, I'm not sure. Remember you?" I said, "Well, I told you I was to be back." And basically tell them, "Do you want to talk to us? Because I got you now." And I said, "I'm going to charge you on multiple cases." And I said, "It's probably going to be a special circumstance case, which, means death penalty or life without possibility of parole." So he talks a little bit without admitting anything. He said, if you can come up with a contract and write it down that I don't get, if I don't get the death penalty, I'll talk to you. So me and my partner, we go back, we met with the DA, and we bring the DA with us. But the DA says, "We're not going to make a deal." He goes, "I can't make a deal with you because I don't know what you're going to offer.
Right.
So I can't make a deal." So he starts off and he says, "Okay, I killed 4. I said, "A total of 4? "Yes, total of 4. "Well, I tell him, okay, and I show him pictures of our other victims. No. And then I said, "I kill anybody at a golf course?" No. He admits to killing Stephanie Brown, the first girl victim, the girl that left with her mother, Charmaine Sabra, the girl from 1977. He admitted that. And he doesn't admit the golf course where we have DNA. So I asked him, "Anybody at golf course?" "No, never went by a golf course, never golf course." So he's thinking, I think he's reading me, and he goes, "Any of those other cases, do you have DNA?" I said, "I sure do." "Okay, I did 5. And so we play that game for a while, and then pretty soon I got 6. And then finally he gets to 7. He goes, I killed 7, and I'm standing on 7. That's his words. I'm standing on 7. So we meet with him. We get a court order. The week later, we get the court order, and we take him out, and we have him bring us back to all the crime scenes. We have him. We meet with the other investigators now. So he brought us up to like Lake Berryessa, where he had dumped the body of Llewellyn Burley. And now it's we're back into 2005, so it's been an extended amount of time between Llewellyn Burley and when we have him now. There's been fires that have gone through there, Floods have gone through there. The landscape's changed quite a bit. So he's trying to show us where he hid her body, and basically didn't hit it. He's just sort of dumped her body in a ravine, and he can't find it. He's looking for these two big rocks. So we even put him up in a helicopter because he was so used to parachuting that thought maybe if we put him up in the air and he saw it from the air, he'd be able to pinpoint it. No luck, but sort of thinking this one area. Well, the one Napa investigator, he kept looking at it, and he goes out there and he thinks, we all thought we had this area isolated right here, and we brought some old maps of the area at that time, and so and I was frustrated. We probably brought Kibbe up there 6-7 times. We walked it, we drove roads.
At the time, you still believed that he was telling the truth. He just didn't know where exactly at this point.
I think he was trying, but in the back of my mind, is he playing games with us too? Because I know he had played some games.
What was his demeanor like at this time? Was it just like, okay, I'm willing to tell you everything now? Now that you found me out.
He's willing to find. I think he's willing to help find her, but on some of the other things, he's still not coming up correctly. But on her, I think he's trying to find, and I think it's his way to say, "See, I'm telling you the truth." So the Napa investigator eventually, he and another deputy had gone out there, and Mike Fry was the investigator from Napa County. Great job. And he'd gone out there and thought this could be the area. Well, what had happened is that there used to be a road, and that's what Kibbe was looking for. This used to be a dirt road that went down across the stream, but it always got flooded out. So people that lived way behind there would have problems. So they excavated part of that mountain and put a bunch of dirt up higher. So when Investigator Fry and another deputy were out there one day, he was telling the deputy, I think it's right around here. The deputy looks in this little stream and sees what he thinks is a cool-looking little rock, and he picks it up, about this big. It's a bone. And it happened to be the bone for Llewellyn Burley. And that's the only part that's ever been recovered from her. She's probably buried under tons and tons and tons of dirt, unless she was, animals unfortunately got to her and everything. So that's the only part that was discovered from her.
And through DNA, you were able to identify hers. That was her.
Yeah, the DNA positively identified her. And then he brought us back to other locations, but not telling the truth of how he got girls to stop or what he did. Like on Stephanie Brown, he tells a couple of different stories. He tells a story that he was driving down I-5 and he looked over when he was passing her up and he says, wow, that's a good-looking girl. And he claims that he was going to pull up ahead and pretend that he had car trouble on an exit ramp, hoping that she would stop. Well, that's bizarre. I mean, and then he told another story of he was going to go over there and throw rocks at her car, trying to get her to stop, but she just happened to pull up behind him. Now, this is just pure speculation on my part. And during that time, like I was in detectives, we used to have, red portable lights that we can put on the dash if we had to do a traffic stop. And unfortunately, we had people that would mimic that. We're doing traffic stops and robbing people and stuff like that.
Right.
He carried his brother's, his brother was actually a homicide detective.
Oh, okay.
He carried his brother's business card with him. He carried handcuffs with him. Did somehow he get a red light? Because when you look at her car was halfway down the exit ramp. It's parked just on the other side of the white fog line. The driver's window's down. I mean, when I first saw the car, I thought, is this a traffic stop? It just had that look. And then another one of our victims that he's not convicted on, Karen Finch. Karen Finch had been up in Sonora, was coming back down, and as she's coming back down off 120 through French Camp onto 99, then she was going to head towards Lodi. But on French Camp Road, her car's found. Her car's pulled on the side of the road. Now, she had a problem. Sometimes the car would overheat, maybe a little bit. But she's coming back down from the mountain. So if it would have overheated, it probably would have overheated going up. Her car, same thing. Pulled on the other side of the fog line, stopped, and then she's found, 40 miles away in Sacramento County. So
Could be him pulling people over, like impersonating a police officer.
That's that's just going through our mind. Is that the case? Other things like on a lot of our victims, personal effects were taken, such as on Stephanie Brown, her purse is missing. On Charmaine Sabra, her purse is missing. So when I confront him on those, he says on Stephanie Brown, no, she didn't have a purse, Then finally he says, oh, you know what? She had one. And he goes, what I did is I kept it and I tied some rocks to it. And when I was going back home after killing her, he would drive all the way down to 12 to Highway 160 by Rio Vista, take the Antioch Bridge to drop back into Antioch. He said, I stopped on the bridge and I threw it in the water. No, I don't believe that. He tied rocks to that. On Charmaine Sabra, he brought us back to that location where he killed her and said that he dumped the purse in some rock crevices. And we searched through all those crevices. But of course, it's years later. And we couldn't find anything. I think that he's got some souvenirs. On the ponytail, on Brown, he said that when he was driving away, he had her ponytail in his hand and he slowly let the hair fall out of his hand. On one of the girls that he killed up by Lake Berryessa, same thing. He cut her hair off in a ponytail, and he says as he drove away, he slowly let the hair go away. I think he's got souvenirs someplace. The problem is if he tells us the souvenirs, then there's probably going to be more. He admits in Modesto there was a young girl that was working as a prostitute, and I forgot, it was either in front of the train station or bus station, and she was about 15, I think, at the time, and she disappears. So we interview Kibbe about this, and he says, yeah, he did pick up a girl in front of the train station or bus station, and described her as a young Spanish girl. That's what he always said, a Spanish girl. And he said he brought her up towards Jackson. He raped her, drove around for a little bit, raped her again, but claims he brought her back and let her go. And so when I confronted him about that a little bit, he said, oh, no, I wouldn't have done that because that'd make me a child killer. Well, he's not going to admit to that because you're in prison. Yeah. And you know how they're looked upon in prison. Right. So he won't admit to that one, and I think he's responsible for that. There's one in Nevada we believe he's responsible for clothes cutting. Then Karen Finch. Karen Finch's clothes are cut and everything, but Karen Finch is not strangled. She's stabbed. And I think the reason that she's stabbed is that when her clothes were getting cut and everything, she knew what was going on. She fought. And he got mad and he stabbed her. So what's lacking in those cases that would put him on that? Is it just there's not enough DNA or not enough clothing or anything like that? On Finch, there's no DNA. Now, we went to grand jury in all these other cases, and the DA, Kevin Mayo, did a fantastic job, and he was willing to do Finch as an MO case, but he was worried about if it would confuse the jury without any evidence. So that was something that we thought maybe we might be able to get him to admit later on. So that wasn't brought up. On the one in Nevada, unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of information from Nevada in regards to that. And then from the missing girl in Modesto, there's just nothing, just from him saying that. So there's more. There's definitely more out there. I'm hoping that he'll still talk to me. So he's still alive. Still alive. Matter of fact, he's right here in prison in Ione. Okay. And as technology improves, I'm sure you'll probably be able to get more evidence out of the property that you have now, perhaps. Just like how, now we're able to get DNA from things from back then. It would be nice. I think we've gone through everything that we possibly could. Now, for those other cases that are out there, I'm hoping, we've put this name out to all the cold case units. Check this guy. There's no doubt he's responsible for more. His birth date is May 21st, 1939. So he's going to be 80 years old here. Is realistically in California, would he ever get the death penalty here? No. I mean, are you going to get anything else? what you are going to get is maybe some answers for families, and I think they deserve that. So my partner and I we're both retired, but we still stay involved, and we want to go out and matter of fact, just recently we're trying to set up another interview with them. And
Have you spoken to him since then? Since the interviews you have?
Yes, and he's sometimes it's funny. We have a weird relationship. Sometimes he's happy to see us, but there's definitely things that he can talk about. I have a feeling, he took a polygraph in our investigation, and in his polygraph, one of the things that he said is that there was no one assisted him, and he passed on that. He said there was no other victims, and he failed miserably on that. So we know that. And during one of my interviews, he goes, let me explain it to you like this. I've got 2 cans in my head. And one can, I'm opening up the lid, letting some secrets out. It's the other can, you'll never get open. So.
You mentioned he was married as well. Did she have any idea about what was going on?
She was not cooperative with us whatsoever. She would not cooperate. On one of the TV interviews, she described herself as being a victim too. She said, all these other family members, they may have lost a daughter, a sister, whatever it is. She goes, but I lost 2. I lost a husband.
Oh, man.
So, not cooperative. Matter of fact, when he was arrested for the murders, we tried to get him to talk, and he said if you let it, he was in Sacramento. I was in the process. Me and my partner were interviewing his brother at the time. Everything went down at one time, and they allowed him. He said, if you allow me to talk to my wife, I will confess to everything. So they put him and his wife in the back of a car together, and unfortunately, it wasn't recorded.
Oh.
It would be just, you can't use that for court purposes, but it's more of an investigation type thing. But he had admitted to his wife that he killed 4 at that time. Now the wife wouldn't talk to us, but it was on Thanksgiving. My partner and I went to a relatives of the wife's house, and they allowed us to put a hidden mic inside the residence. And then one of the relatives spoke with the wife, and that's when the wife admitted that at that time that he had confessed to 4. And she made the comment at that time, she goes, these cops are so desperate to get him, but you know what? He's going to beat this case, and he's going to be out again. So, yeah, she definitely knew at one point that he was involved. There was another incident where on one of the prostitutes that he had raped and killed, he ended up getting a STD. He got crabs. And she went and bought a treatment for him so he could get rid of the crabs. And then when we did the search warrant at their house, she had a bed, and then he had a small little cot that didn't sleep together. So there was a lot of suspicions. Now, when I was going back and talking to Roger, like I said, it was a weird relationship between he and me and my partner, Rosenquist, and he ended up making me this paper mache mobile and all these little birds. And, in prison they make little arts and crafts, and he made me one of these things. And so next time I talked to him, I said, my secretary saw that, and she took it from me, and she's got it hanging above her desk, but she did. She had taken it. And he said, well, I'll make you another one. Well, then he makes me another one, and he said, can you give this to my wife? I said, okay. So track her down. And I don't have a physical address, but somehow I remember I found a phone number for her. And I called her up on the phone, and she would never talk to us. She would not talk to us. She just couldn't stand us. So I called her up, and I said, hey, explained who I was. I said, I want to talk to you. And you can see that right away she's a little bit negative. But I said, I'm talking to Roger. He's talking to us now. He's confessed to everything. And she was shocked. And I said, matter of fact, I have a present for you from Roger. She goes, what is it? Well, I knew it was one of those paper mache things, but I don't want to tell her because I want to meet with her.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I have it, and I'd like to meet with you. And so we make arrangements to meet with her the next week. I think it's 4 or 5 days later, she had a heart attack and died.
Oh.
So we never got to talk to her. Now, the person that wrote the book on this, she talked to him. She spoke with him because she thought she was going to get some money, some royalties out of this book. And she admitted that after he was arrested, he told her to get rid of a diamond, small little diamond that he had, and a pair of shoes that had blood on them. So she disposed of those. And she could have, if she was cooperative, she could have given us those. Now, I suspect the shoes that had blood on them, that's the one Karen Finch where he stabbed. If we would have had that was our evidence to link him to that one.
Yeah. So he was, like you said, he took the polygraph and it showed that he did these things by himself, but afterward.
He did it by himself, but many more victims.
Yeah.
Because we were wondering, could somebody else be involved with them? You always have that feeling. Is it a two-man group? Is it more than that?
During your conversations with him, did he ever explain why he did this?
He said he didn't know why. We had, after he was convicted, we had a person that was supposed to be a specialist with serial killers come in, and he came in and talked to him, and they did a little TV show on that, and they speculated that the reason he cut the clothes because it was his way to harm women without actually harming women. Well, when we had done the background on Roger, we discovered when he was 15, a lot of people, even to this day, people would hang their clothes out on a clothesline to dry them, let the sun dry them. Well, he was going around, he grew up down in Chula Vista by San Diego. He was going around stealing ladies' clothes, bringing the clothes back home and cutting them. So it was very significant for him at that time. Now, he hated his mother. When we would talk to him about his mother, he hated her. He wouldn't even refer to his mom. He would refer to him as my father's wife. And he would tell a story of when he was just an infant, of his father coming home and his father finding him crying, laying in the garden. And I said, "Where did you get that story from?" And he said, "Oh, my aunt told me." And but he obviously doesn't remember that, but he resents his mother for that. And then when he was growing up, this 1940, he was born in 39, so right around 1945, we're in World War II, and during that time, we had to, not that I was alive then, but you had to preserve your flour and everything because we were sending a lot of things for our soldiers.
Right.
So he had taken a big tub of flour and poured it on the floor, and he had his little trucks, his little army trucks, and he was driving it through it. Well, his mother found that and gave him a spanking. And he felt that was totally irresponsible on her part, regretted it. So little things like that. He wasn't popular in school. He had learning disabilities, maybe dyslexic, maybe his dad, when we did talk to his dad said that he would take him to the movies, and Roger would just basically be by himself. Didn't really have too many friends and everything.
Was he into drugs and alcohol too, or no?
They said no drugs or alcohol. He did. He had gone to prison before for thefts. He was an avid parachutist. As a matter of fact, he was a suspect one time in an arson of a hobby shop, and he took a polygraph that was administered by a San Diego sheriff at that time in regards to that case. And the polygrapher at that time described Roger, because we got the reports. I actually talked to the individual. Described Roger Kibbe, and this is back in 70s, early 70s, and he described Roger Kibbe as potentially being one of the world's most dangerous men ever encountered. And when we went back and talked to him, I said, "How did you write something so dramatic as that?" And he said, "Because this guy hated women. He hated women so much that he had a girlfriend at the time that they warned the girlfriend that you need to stay away from this guy." The guy nailed it at that time. I mean, he really nailed it. And when we went back and talked to all the old officers that investigated him, they all remembered him, and which I thought was amazing. And they're all retired, and they said, if you would have came over there and asked us about Joe the burglar, wouldn't remember everything. Him we always remembered because we thought he was going to end up killing and doing something. They were so convinced they actually went way beyond and set him up with counselors and everything to try to get him some help. So
was there domestic violence also involved with him and his wife, or probably nothing
he says
reported?
Only 2 times did he get physical with his wife. He had pushed her one time, and maybe just he said a light hit one other time. Was the only 2 times. But when you look at the things as serial killers, they say that they're involved in theft, hate their mother, involved in fires.
Hurting small animals, that kind of
And
thing.
that was, that was the only thing we couldn't find was the small animals, hurting
Okay.
small animals. That was the only thing we couldn't find. He was when he was about 15 years old, he admitted that he was going around peeping in windows very frequently, and then he was actually entering residences and hiding, watching females get undressed.
Yeah.
So you could see this was a progression for this person. Now, according to his cellmate in prison, he admits to his cellmate the first girl he killed was in the 1960s. It was down south, and he said that he brought a girl out into the sand dunes, had killed her, and then just dumped her body and pushed some sand on top of her. We couldn't find anything that correlated with that at that time, so I don't know if true, not true, but it's obvious this guy's been a killing machine for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's been active for that amount of years. And now you mentioned his brother was in law enforcement. How did his brother take this news that once he was arrested?
His brother initially didn't believe it. When we talked to the brother, said, if you don't have evidence, he goes, I don't believe it. I said, well, we've got really good evidence. And the brother eventually, my understanding is cut all contact with Roger. And the brother since passed away too.
Oh. And you mentioned you're planning on going back to re-interview him at some point. Is it going to be basically going over the cases again and seeing if he's willing to admit at this point?
Yeah, see what else he's willing to admit. Time goes by, maybe he's softened up, and maybe he's willing to go ahead and give more information. There's I know there's more out there, and like I said, it's not going to give him any more time. It's not going to do that. But if you could bring some answers to the families, I think that's important. That's important.
Are there newer cases that you have that you're going to bring to him, or?
No. Most of the ones we've talked to, I'm just going to see if he can come up on. Now, I know there was another agency in California. I don't want to say who, but there's another agency in California who is currently looking at him right now for a couple more cases. So they may have DNA, and that's what they're looking at right now. So if they can grab some DNA, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite an interesting case, and it's still ongoing.
Still ongoing. So that started it in '86, and then finally we convicted him of the 7 in 2009. So it's a long process.
And very tragic with what happened to the victims. How did this affect you?
It did. Absolutely. I remember testifying in the grand jury, and I remember them asking me a question in regards to Charmaine Sabra, the girl that was with her mom. And he had picked her up, and they went to an area by Ione on a hill, and he raped her. And after he raped her, he said he even made a comment to her, said, "What are you going to name this one?" Like he had impregnated her because he knew that she had a young baby. And so now he's going to walk her into the field, and he says, "Give me your purse." And she won't give the purse up because her pictures of her babies are in the purse. She goes, I'm not going to do it. And she's holding on a long time. Well, I'm testifying in that, the grand jury. All of a sudden, it just, it hits me, and I got, tears coming down my eyes. I said, oh man, this is taking a toll. When we did that, one of the TV shows, they'd asked me, after you got DNA back on Brown, what'd you do? And I said, well, first thing I did is call family, and I start welling up again. So it did. It probably took years off my life and everything. I mean, I remember coming home with those my reports when first we had nothing, and at 2 a.m. I'd wake up, just go through the reports. What am I missing? How come? What am I missing here? How come we're not getting this solved? Stuff. So yeah, it did take a toll, and in a strange way, on an offshoot, in a strange way, good things did come of this. We got the serial killer law, which we used against him in this case.
Okay.
It's because we went back and we could charge him all the time in our county, so we used that against him. When I went back from working homicide, after a while, I needed to get back onto the streets. Go back and I'm working canine, and leaving the jail. It's nighttime, about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. I make a traffic stop of a car that's coming out of a field out there in French Camp, and go up to the guy, and I look in the back seat. I could see a lady's handbag and shoes, and he's coming off this dirt road, and he's by himself. Thinking, did he just, and then you start thinking, did he just dump somebody back there? So backup unit, 2 deputies responded to back me up on the traffic stop. And I said, hey, can you go down that dirt road? And I said, I got ladies' clothing in there, and can you go down there and take a look? They go down there. Sure enough, they came across a female who had just been shot and run over.
Really?
And this was the suspect. And so get him out of the car, and then that's when I realized, he's got some blood on his hands. And so miraculously, because we're right there close to San Joaquin General Hospital, they had the trauma unit. They rushed her there, and she actually survived. She actually, they said had it been another couple minutes, she'd have been gone. So, in a weird sense, tragic as this is, some people maybe got some resolve. I don't know. I try to look at it that way. Maybe something good happened. But it's very tragic for the families. It's something that you always hear people say they have closure. These families have no closure. They live with this forever. That's why I always say maybe just what we're doing right now would maybe to give answers, but there's no closure.
Yeah.
There's no closure for them.
Yeah, and if it's just someone reading a report or someone just watching a TV show about these crimes, they don't have to see the families that's behind the victims and how they're going through this every day. And
absolutely. The families are forgotten in our system. Our system does not take, I don't believe it takes into the account of our victims. It's a lifelong punishment the families get, and unfair for them.
Do you still stay in contact with some of the families?
No, not, I always felt that, like, I'm the guy that reminds them of the bad things. The families were great. One of the last families I talked to was just 2 years ago. But I always felt bad that to reach out to them, and when I do see them, when I did see them through all this, all the family members are fantastic. Very grateful for everything. You wish you could do more for them, but I always felt like I'm the guy that's going to remind them of the bad time. So I always felt weird about that.
Kind of reopening old wounds.
Yeah.
So now that you're retired, what have you got going on now?
Teaching. Still, like I said, still doing some stuff with this. Hopefully, this will progress. When I retired, luckily I had. You know how it is. You're so active in this line of work, active, and all of a sudden one day you just shut down, and that really worried me.
Yeah.
Of retiring, stopping, because I liked my job. I absolutely loved this job. And all of a sudden, just to stop, I was worried at what effect that was going to have on me. I didn't know I could do it. So luckily, I was able to still go back and do some gang work, gang teaching. I was still getting frequently called with gangs, and I still had a gang trial pending, murder trial pending. So it kept me going, and it was a slow transition into retirement. So that worked out good for me. Thank God for that.
Yeah, I mean, you sometimes see guys that retire and then they'll be off for a couple of months, and then they come back as part-timers because they miss the job, they want to get back into it. So a little hard to just be done with it.
It is very, very hard, and that's what I was worried about. So luckily for me, it worked out really good. And then, like I said, I'm teaching, and I get to do all my hunting and golf, and I'm still horrible at golf. So that hasn't improved at all. So
nice. Now, you mentioned the motorcycle gangs, and what was your take on, I know there's not just motorcycle gangs, but there's groups in law enforcement with motorcycles, if you want to go down that road or not.
Oh, that's really sensitive. I don't understand why anybody in law enforcement would want to emulate a motorcycle gang. I just can't get it. Motorcycle gangs do not like cops. I'm telling you, they do not like you. Even though they may sit there and be kind to you or say something, they're using you. They don't like you. They've assaulted officers. They've killed officers. Why in the world would you emulate that lifestyle? You know, we tell people at the academy, you have to be careful now in law enforcement. You're in law enforcement. Don't let anybody know you're in law enforcement. You don't go out and wear, you know, your patch as you're driving to work so people could see you're an officer in the car. You hide all that stuff.
Yeah.
So what do people do when they join these police groups? The people don't know. The citizens don't know who they are. The bad guys do. And where do they go to events at? They go to the, you know, street vibrations and stuff like that. So the people that know that they're cops are the bad guys. Why would you let a bad guy know who you are? I don't understand that. Now, when I started working motorcycle gangs, it was an eye-opener for the amount of corruption that I saw. People will do the stupidest things in the world for a motorcycle gang member. I don't understand why. I think there's that old infatuation with it. I'm not saying that the police groups do, because there are some good police groups, I should say, and there's a lot of good cops in these police groups. There were some. I had friends that were in those groups. I never understood why they did that, and we would go back and forth on that. But sometimes people make really stupid decisions where they want to be that guy's buddy, and you're just getting used. I never understood that at all. I had written a paper a while back because I was so frustrated with these police clubs. And I had written this, as some people say, my dissertation, but you know, it was 7 or 8 pages long. And one of the other officers had it, and he sent it out on the internet, and it was coming back, and I was getting threats from people in law enforcement. Some people were saying, you know, that they're going to stick their boot right up my kazoo and stuff like that. It was like, you've got to be kidding.
And these are fellow officers.
Yes. It was, I just like, what are we doing?
Is their rationale is just the camaraderie outside of work? Is that what it is?
You know, that's what they're saying. It's the camaraderie. And I understand that. But do you have to put a patch on? Can't you just jump on a motorcycle and go? Now, one of the guys I talked to, he was in a police group, and he said they went up to Lake Tahoe, and Lake Tahoe was having a big event, and there were a bunch of outlaws there. They all got their patches on, and he says, you know, they're all looking at you. They're all looking at you. And he said he went up to his room, he took his patch off, and he came back down, and he said it's a weight had been lifted off his back. He said, I got to walk around. I didn't feel like I was a target anymore. No one was looking at me. And eventually, I think that was an eye-opener for him, because he eventually quit the group. And that's what I try to explain to the young guys. Before you try to do something like that, don't go advertise that you're a cop.
Yeah.
And then you watch. I've watched some cop groups where they really get an attitude about themselves, where they're walking around, and I've been with family members and everything, and I said, well, that's a cop. They said, you're kidding. I said, yeah, that's a cop. Well, look at the way they're walking and acting. Yeah. It's like one of the outlaw bikers told me, it's called patch fever. He says, you know, he goes, imagine it like this. You're a Marine, and you get that anchor and globe on you, and you're proud you got that. He says, we get that patch. That's what we feel. And he says, some guys get patch fever, and they think that they're bigger in the world, and they want to take on the world. Well, I think that filters over into some of these guys, too. But that's, you know, it's a controversial subject. The people that are, you probably have some cop clubs watch this, and they're just screaming and yelling at me right now. That's, you know what, just what I feel and just what I've seen, and unfortunately there's been confrontations between cop clubs and outlaw motorcycle gangs that should have never have occurred.
And when you have cops that are in these organizations and the bad guys see them, they already know that these guys are armed because they're police officers. So that, I mean, that ups the problem there.
Yes. Wouldn't you just want to just lay low and have the advantage if there ever came to something like that where gunplay became involved? Wouldn't you want to have that advantage? Why would you let them know? And like a lot of the gang members have said, why is it that you can carry a gun and I can't? You know, I've talked to some of the guys that were infiltrated some of the outlaw clubs, and they've had confrontations with police clubs, where one of them was actually involved in a fight. And he said, he's very weird. He goes, I'm fighting as an outlaw but I'm a cop. And he says, you know, we were winning, and as soon as we're winning, what do the cops do? They take out their guns. So, you know, like he said, you know, and the bikers will say, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. And it's not the way to live your life. You've already taken enough risk on your normal job. Why take it out in your personal life?
Yeah. And is this something that's usually accepted within agencies too? They know their guys are out and their guys and gals are out there involved in this?
Some agencies are actually putting out policies that they can't.
Okay.
The issue is, you know, freedom of speech. And that's the whole thing. It's freedom of speech.
Right.
Let's face it. You know it as well as I do. As your cop, your freedom of speech is limited.
Yes.
That's just the way it is. And when you know, that badge has to mean something. That badge means more than that patch. It has to mean more than the patch.
Yeah, you're representing something more than just yourself at
Yes.
this point.
And so the freedom of speech goes, unfortunately, however you want, you know, people get all upset about that. Your freedom of speech as a law enforcement officer is limited. And that's why there's some things you can do, you can't do. And I always put it like this. Imagine you had officers on your department who were dressing down as street gang members, had the rags hanging out their pocket, and had the walk and all doing that. What would the department attitude be about that? So what's the difference?
Yeah. You want to symbolize, order and partnerships with the community.
Yeah, I mean, there was my wife and daughter were going to a restaurant, and this was when I was working the bikers, and I had long hair and a beard at the time and everything. And we see a bunch of bikers in front of the restaurant, and my wife goes, "Oh no, can't go there, can't go there." Well, I see right away it's a cop club. I said, "We're going to go in." Now I'm going in, and I'm looking like probably a dirty shirt biker and everything. So when I'm going in, I'm getting glares and everything is going in, and I'm just smiling. I'm smiling, and I haven't told my wife yet that they were cop clubs. I said, "We're going to go." So we go in there and we sit down, and she goes, "Oh my God, they were staring at you." I said, "Yeah." I said, "They're all cops." She goes, "You're kidding." I said, "No." And I said, "Now just watch how they act." And as they're in there, they're not intimidating anybody, but just their presence and the way they're dressed is intimidating to the general public. And the public would be shocked if we sit there and said, "These are all cops." And it would be shocked. And it's not the presence. I don't think that's what we want in law enforcement. It's particularly now at times you want the community to support you. It's a horrible time out there right now. You don't need to add anything to it.
Yeah. You don't want to add to the negative perception that's out there right now for law enforcement.
No. It's just I think it's just a bad idea. I understand the camaraderie. I completely understand that.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a patch to do it.
Do you think we're doing enough, or the law enforcement community is doing enough to build those relationships with the community? I mean, did you see a big difference between when you first started until when you retired?
I think so. I think they do a lot more to reach out to the community now, and I think that's important. I mean, every law enforcement agency would want to have be reflective of what the community is, race-based, gender-based, whatever it is. You'd want to have to be reflective of the community. You want to do that. So I think we try to achieve that more, and I think that we have more programs where we do reach out now to the community. I know that there's a lot of agencies have special little groups where they go out and meet with the community or assign cars. I mean, and it used to be when I first started, this was my area, this is my beat, man, and I knew that. Me and my partner, we knew the people on that beat.
Yeah.
We worked that. We knew those people. And then you started getting away from that a little bit. But now I think, like the sheriff's office has community cars. They're getting back into and then we had community cars for a long time, but they were pulling away because of budgets. Now they're getting back into it again. And I think we're doing it a little bit better. And then with, social media, it's so much easier to stay in contact with the community. Sheriff's office, police department, they have Facebooks and they put information out all the time. So I think it makes it a lot easier to stay in contact.
Yeah, I mean, you knew the business owners, not only that, but you also knew the people that were always causing problems. And maybe it was because of the budget, like you mentioned, that they had to kind of downsize the amount of time they were able to spend on calls or the amount of time they were able to spend walking up and down the street talking to business owners.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned with social media, now not only can you put out information that's breaking so that you make sure the actual facts are out there, but you're also able now to accept tips from anonymous people to help solve problems.
Yeah.
And being in homicide, how helpful was that to get tips from the community?
Oh, geez. Just, that one phone call, just put me in the right direction and let me try to find. Absolutely. Unfortunately, we didn't get a lot.
Yeah.
We didn't get a lot. So you really have to go out there and do your own way. But those, if they do come in, they can be, tremendous.
Yeah.
They are tremendous. Any little bit. Sometimes we get good tips, and it leads into a much bigger thing. So those are important to have. And I think probably the main thing is to stay in contact with the community and build those relations, because you got to have trust. And if you don't have trust, you're not going to get those phone calls.
Yeah. Being able to go out there and talk to people, and then who knows, maybe later on they'd feel comfortable, like you said, to come up to you and say, "Hey, I don't know if you're looking for this, but I just heard someone did this," and that could be the break you're looking for.
Yeah. Now the unfortunate part is what really hurts the community. A lot of the little nuances that are being ignored. Maybe the transients, the little drugs on the streets, the little drug deal. No one's got the manpower to deal with it. It's become it should be more of a social issue, but typically it's done. All those problems like that get dumped back on law enforcement, and that's a big social issue. How are they going to clean that up? Well, it continues to be a law enforcement problem, and law enforcement does not have the manpower to deal with all those little nuances. But those little nuances are what the people are complaining about for their lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke with somebody once before, and they had mentioned that they hear a lot of complaints. They don't hear the complaints about, the amount of murders that are going up. Not as often. They mostly hear the complaints about, the homeless that are down the street, or the broken windows in this business that's been boarded up or whatever. And so it's these things they have the constant reminder of is what they're making the complaints about.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
I mean, rightfully so. I don't blame them to have to, you have your home and you want to live in peace and everything, and you don't want that in your area. It's not good for, I'm a true believer of the broken window theory.
Right.
You ignore those little nuances like that, and they continue to grow and grow and grow. And I really believe in that. So I don't blame them whatsoever as far as those. I remember one time when I was working in an area car, and they had us go to a community meeting and to find out what the problems were. I was convinced I already knew what the problems were. Problems were, we got burglaries going on, we got the thefts going on, and the number one complaint, top two complaints, were barking dogs and racing cars.
Did that surprise you when you heard that?
It surprised me. And I said, that's why you need to listen to what they're complaining about. And so what we did, we got animal control involved, and then we got our group team, and we got CHP involved, and we took care of a lot of the traffic problems and everything. And that's what they wanted. And of course, we took care of a lot of the other burglaries and stuff. But when you took care of a lot of the little nuances, you go back and look at your stats, and the crime in the area would just drop.
Yeah. I mean,
it really does.
How important is that to know that? Yeah, of course I know what crime is going on in this area. I work this beat, but then to be able to listen to the people that live there when you're not there, and hear those problems, that's something that's
Yeah.
extremely important.
It really is. Like I said, it was an eye opener for me.
Yeah, and it
Eye-opener for me.
helps
I thought
build that
I-
relationship too.
Yeah, I thought I knew it all.
Any tips or final thoughts for any of the newer generation going into the business?
For the new guys get in there, I think this is a job you have to have a passion for. This is a job it's not 8 to 5. This is a job that when you're done with your shift, doesn't mean you're done with it. I mean, you have to work out. You have to stay in good physical condition. You're going to put more time in for this type of job. If you want to do a good job, you have to put a lot of time, your own time in. And at the same time, don't make this job be everything. Have time with your family and time away so you stay sane. You're going to see in this particular job for the young guys, you're going to see things that people shouldn't see.
Yeah.
People shouldn't see, and you're going to have to remember that. I remember one of the psychs that came in and talked to us. You're reacting to in a normal way to an abnormal situation, and I remember telling that to the young guys. So don't feel bad if you're feeling weird about something. Guarantee one thing not to do. You get into a stressful situation and you're done for work. What's really easy to do? It's go out and have a drink. It's the last thing you want to do. When you're stressed out, go out and work out. Go out, do cardio, lift some weights, do something, but don't go out and drink. So the young guys just have that passion and dedication to the job. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, and you owe it to your partner that you're dedicated to this job to make everyone safe. That'd be my advice to them. Like I said, I thought I had the passion. I love this job.
Yeah. Striking that balance, very important.
That gotta have that balance. Yeah.
Well, Vito, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
And I thank you for your many years of service to the community.
Thank you for yours.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much.
Hey, nice job.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
And that's it.